Well, joining us now, ASUU chairman at the University of Lagos, Ashiru, and Arise News analyst, Professor Adeniyi, who is also a professor at Bayes University here in Abuja. Thank you both, gentlemen, for joining us on the news tonight. Mr. Ashiru, let me begin with you. I mean, we've been on this for over 200 days. Would you say that we are any closer to our universities reopening for lectures than they were when you called the strike over 200 days ago?
Well, the fact remains that a university is a universal phenomenon, and practices there ought to conform to regulations, to, academic standards the world over. In Nigeria, we have university systems that the university system is decaying over the years, and the intervention of our union is to arrest the decay in the university system. Now, government over the years have promised to assist, in arresting the decay by entering into several agreements with our union. The reality is that till date, those agreements are not fulfilled, they are not met. So the question really is not about counting days, it's about ensuring that you have a university that can be properly so called. And that is the challenge with the Nigerian university system.
Let's bring in Prof. To be sure, the federal government only yesterday said it's uncertain on school reopening, so we can't even begin to talk about that. Recently, the federal government said, look, the agreements with successive administrations were done under duress, and that it's not ready to go into an agreement that it's not even able to meet up on. Otherwise, they'll be accused of reneging on their own side of the deal. What do you make of this?
Well, I think it's been compounded by approaches to issues, really. Otherwise, they shouldn't have lasted this long. First, I think governments often see lecturers or striking lecturers as being arbitrarish, and then people, who are talking from a distance, not being realistic with their demands. That's the mindset I think government has. On the other hand, ASUU, they are Nigerians, they are witnesses to everything that is happening, to the opulence in the public sector, to the fact that government is able to release billions in some instances through intervention funds, trillions sometimes. And of course, when they are making their demands, you keep saying that you do not have resources, whereas, they are witnesses to sometimes scandals, salacious scandals running into billions as well, all coming from the same economy. So if you're saying that you do not have the resources, that we are grandstanding, that we're being unrealistic, that you cannot come into agreement with us, how come from this same system these resources are coming out, are still being realized, are coming out as the case could be? So against all this background, I think what could happen really is for both sides. I think ASUU really, forget the fact that they are colleagues, I think ASUU has laid its cards well on the table. The other thing that government, I think, should do, like I've always said, is for them to show the greater grace, realizing that they are the bigger loser in this crisis. Like sociologists who put it, ASUU is just a unit of a public sector. They represent a unit of an entire societal ecosystem, but the government represents the whole, and the whole should be the one that should be more graceful in the circumstance. How well are public officials talking to ASUU? How well are they negotiating with them? Are they integrating them? Are they be very persuasive? Be very convincing in the meetings that they have been having? Oftentimes, we just have the impression that it's one of confrontation, one of cavalier treatment of the demands, coming from these these lecturers. But we need to also realize that, the lecturers, the professors, they are the intellectual conscience of the society, and they are fighting for a critical public institution. And that institution is very important to preserve against the background of the death, of the decline of primary and secondary institutions over the years. We do not want public institutions to go that route as well. Remembering that, private institutions, private universities are on the rise, and of course, state universities are also not doing badly. So public institutions need to be preserved for different reasons.
In public universities are now flocking to private
Ashiru,
universities.
Even though the government says it does not know when the schools will resume, I asked you that question because of the several negotiations you've got into, and the government seems to put the blame at the doorstep of ASUU, saying it has made demands. It's not going to rescind on its decision of no work, no pay. So it looks like the government has passed, you could call it a buck, back to ASUU to say it's now left in your hands to reopen the schools. But I also want to ask you, because your union seems to be opposed to increased tuition, the umbrella union body in Nigeria, the Nigeria Labour Congress, is also opposed to removal of subsidy, fuel subsidy, which some analysts would say, will save the country a lot of money, and perhaps those monies could be channeled into the education sector, the monies you're calling for. So what is the way forward really? How do we begin to become creative in getting these funds, the critical funds you need for the universities to thrive?
Well, you have a number of questions. I don't know which one to start with, but let me start with the last one. Government claims to be funding fuel subsidy. This same Buhari administration, before he became head of state, came on air to tell us that if anybody tells Nigerians that is paying subsidy, that person is a fraud. When APC was campaigning, they told us that there's nothing like fuel subsidy. But under the same APC government, fuel subsidy had snowballed from what it was under Jonathan, more than 100%. So who is deceiving who? That's point number one. Point number two is that, well, the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria says that it shall be the duty of government to educate its citizens, to tertiary level. So if government is failing in, discharging this responsibility, then it means that the Nigerian people must hold such government accountable. The third question is to say that you recall that we had an agreement with government in 2009. In that agreement, the government ought to review, any of the party can call for a review of that agreement every 3 years. Now, between 2009 and today, government has refused to renegotiate that agreement. Now, when we started in 2017 under Babalaki, for one reason or the other, the agreement couldn't be reviewed. Muzalil Jubril in 2021 succeeded in producing a document. Government came and jettisoned it. That's not our union. Now, when we commenced this strike, government also set up the Nimi Briggs Committee. And we negotiated with the Nimi Briggs Committee. Nimi Briggs the committee had come to the open to say that they had the mandate of the Minister of Education, consequently that of government, and that they have gone around all government ministries, who ought to accede to our demands, and they gave an offer. Our union accepted that offer, only for the same minister to back down on that and then begin to feed Nigerians with lies. I think that we need to take a chronological, understanding of the issues with a view to putting the blame where it rightly belonged. The fact remains that our union had conceded a lot in the interest of the Nigerian people. What is clear is that we are up against a group of people whose interest is really not in the welfare of the people they swore to defend. And that is unfortunate. For us, we believe that this strike can end within 48 hours if government demonstrates enough sincerity of purpose, demonstrates good faith in negotiating in the principles of collective bargaining with a view to putting this crisis to an end. Nothing short of that will make our union go back to classrooms that are less competitive when you put our universities on a global ranking.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Ashiru there. Prof, I mean, it's looking really bleak hearing from Dr. Adeniyi Ashiru there, the ASUU chairman, Unilag. Let's talk about solutions, the way forward. A lot has been said about, you know, the need to have the town and gown approach where the community at different levels can actually come in, because really the reality, based on what we're seeing in Nigeria, is that government alone cannot fund federal universities. What would you say is the practical long-term way out?
Well, first, you expect Dr. Ashiru to be very forceful. He's a unionist, and of course, there are hopes. You know, I don't believe that it's still very bleak. I believe that there'll be solution. You know, solution is there. We are going by the determinations of sections of government officials. You know, we have pro-chancellors and vice-chancellors committee meeting. I'm confident that with their experience, they will be able to leverage on that to provide immediate solutions. You know, while we are thinking about the long-term remedy, you know, to the perennial, to the incessant strike. Well, back to your question, I think, you know, there are so many ways around it. You know, universities are supposed to be autonomous. How would they get, public institutions, for instance, how would they get funded, you know, if not from government? You know, the other ways they can rely on is endowment, grants, you know, and things like that. But how much of it do we have in this part of the world, you know, where the market is weak, the economy is always on a tailspin? You know, you need a strong economy to be able to thrive on those other fundings. You know, universities across the world are funded based on the political economy operational in those countries. In countries in Eastern Europe, of course, it's primarily public funding. If you come to the West, it's public-private sector partnership, and mostly again private ownership. But in our own system, it's still very, very peculiar. It's just in the last decade or so that we are seeing the rise of private universities. You know, we just hope this will continue, you know, going by, you know, science. You know, but again, we have to be ready to preserve the public institutions because they represent, you know, there's also the value they add, you know, to the system should not be lost, particularly in being able to accommodate the large chunk of youths who are not able to afford private institutions, as the case could be.
Dr. Ashiru, I mean, just counting the cost is what we have been doing on Arise News in the past couple of days from different universities and all aspects of the society. Everyone is at a loss with this strike continuing. You know, the popular adage that says Rome wasn't built in a day. When you say ASUU has considered in this particular ongoing industrial action, can you tell us, you know, just how much you've considered and what else, you know, the government needs to do? You said 48 hours, you can end all of this. What will the government do for you to return? Are you saying it's all or nothing at this point?
Well, you don't go to a negotiation and say it is either all or nothing. I told you that this is the 13th year that we have been struggling to get government to review an agreement we signed in 2009. Now, is it right for a government to set up a committee? The committee will make recommendations, and then that government would just throw that recommendation off the board, just like that. That's one. Number two is that, what are the demands of ASUU? We are saying that, you know, review the conditions of service of those who teach in the universities. We are not even comparing with developed countries. We are talking about an African average. The salary of a university professor at Bar in Nigeria is less than $1,000. And this is worrisome because you must also draw a linkage between the welfare of those who teach, those they teach, and what they teach. That's one. Number two, you find a university where a hostel built, you know, to accommodate 3-4 people in a room is today accommodating 16-21 people in that same room. How will students learn under such discrepant condition. We are saying that government should fund these universities in order to revitalize them. And these are telltales of, occurrences in our university. You have forcefully enrolled us on IPPIS. Today, IPPIS has been discredited. It has been described as a fraud. You ask us to provide an alternative, which we have provided. And yet, you are still prevaricating in deploying the alternative you asked for. So for me, the way forward is for government to sign the already concluded renegotiated agreement with the NIMI-BRICS committee and commence its implementation. The second is to take us out of the now very fraudulent and discredited IPPIS scheme and deploy UTAS as a payment platform for us in the university system. And finally, implement, other agreements in the December 2020 Memorandum of Action, which includes the release of government white paper. That doesn't cost money. On visitation reports, the payment of academic end allowances, revitalization fund and all that, government says it's going to put it in the 2023 budget. But we're also aware that government goes to the National Assembly to make supplementary budgets on, items that are not as important as the education of the citizens. What we are seeing here is a deliberate attempt to destroy public universities for whatever reason, best known to those who are at the helm of affairs. But we are confident and we are willing to sit down with government, negotiate the gray areas with a view to bringing this strike to an end. But it must be within those parameters that I have enumerated above.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Dele Ashiru, ASUU Chairman, UNILAG Chapter, Associate Professor Abiodun Adeniyi at the Bayes University, and Arise News Analyst. Thank you both, gentlemen, for joining us on Newsnight.